Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make a custom plywood sign. The plywood I used here is furniture grade, which means that it has a really nice veneer on the front and a really nice veneer on the back. So both sides lack any imperfections. Sometimes what you see is on plywood you see like the little biscuit cutouts. Well, furniture grade plywood does not have that. Now in this case here we CNC routed it with the machine you can see behind me here. And we made it as a stencil so that all the inside parts, like inside here, doesn't fall out. The thickness of the plywood is 3/4 inch. And what the customer would actually use this for is to fill up a gap they have in their business. So what happened is originally we were going to do this out of metal, but with the cost of metal and all the other headaches involved with it right now, they decided to go with plywood, and for this application it works out fine. It's a lot lighter than it would be if it was made out of steel. And the nice thing about plywood like this especially is that it paints really, really well. So you could actually spray paint it to make it look like pretty much any kind of metal you can imagine. Although plywood is available in a lot of different thicknesses, by far the most useful one for signs that we use here in the shop is 3/4 inch. And of that, it's furniture grade. The nice thing about furniture grade is you have a nice clean sanded surface on both sides, and the imperfections are an absolute minimum. Sometimes there are still some issues, but we can work around that generally using our CNC router. Now here what I'm doing is I'm just carving out the letters one at a time, but I'm also pocketing them out. What was happening is that all the little pieces that were sort of left over were getting sucked into the vacuum system. Now that's not generally too much of an issue, but you got to remember that the vacuum system has impellers, and those impellers are made out of aluminum. So a nice, chunk of plywood going through the system could dent them or actually ruin them. Then I got to buy a new impeller or basically a new dust system. So that's something I could be very careful for this kind of job. So for this specific job, what I actually did is actually turn the vacuum system off. So that's what you'll see at the beginning of it when I started. You'll see it's a relatively clean cut. And then as I proceed further down the line, it just gets messier. And you can definitely see it right now, the mess that's being created. Now I prefer to have a messy sort of work surface than have a problem with the dust system. This doesn't affect the cut in any way. The router, the little pieces, they might vibrate a little bit, they might go back into the router bit and get chewed a little bit more, but it doesn't matter because it's basically just scrap anyways. And then what I sort of found out is I could get it with vacuuming a little bit and not all the time. So what I would do is I turn the system on and off, so I would have a consistent sucking, enough to suck in all of those little pieces that I was generating with my router. Now that's something that comes up every once in a while with smaller pieces, and it doesn't matter. In this case here I'm using my ShopBot, but I also have the same issue with my Thermwood, which is a much bigger, more rigid machine. Small pieces are just a headache that you have to sort of deal with. And it doesn't matter how good of a vacuum system you have, they'll go flying off anywhere they want to go. Now here, of course, I cut in the inside parts, but I'm cutting out the sign. In this case here, again, the customer will be painting it, so it doesn't really matter what the surface is, but at least with furniture grade plywood, they have a nice surface to clean and work from with their paint. So what are the limitations when it comes to making signage like this? The biggest limitation actually is generally the font. Generally the customer has a really nice font, really nice image, all that kind of stuff, and they want to cut it through. And again, they always have problems because the inside of A's and O's and all that kind of stuff, they want to fall through. Now there's a couple of ways around that. One is to add bridges like you saw in that one there. Another way is to, when you make the sign, you do that and then you glue it in the center if that's possible. The other limitation is actually the size of the overall lettering. You can see here I have a 4x8 sheet of furniture grade plywood. I can get it 5x10 feet, and that's the limitation. So let's say you wanted this sign to be absolutely massive. Well, then your limitation would be the largest letter, which in this case is the W. So the W cannot be more than 5x10. It will fit inside of that area. So those, those are some of your limitations when it comes to making custom projects. Now, of course, we glue it together and make other things to make it bigger, but that's generally your biggest limitation when it comes to it.
Another thing to keep in mind is when you do custom signage like this, you want it nice and thick as well because it adds a lot of strength. And you got to keep in mind that, you know, if it's outdoors as well, if you have the sun going on it, it will create a shadow. Now in this case here, 3/4 inch is perfect because the shadow will just, you know, it will help improve the design of the sign itself. It'll get more of an aesthetic feel. But sometimes people have very, very thin areas, and that can be problematic because it's so fragile that it's easy to break. So if you're looking for custom signage out of metal, plastic, wood, anything, contact me at CNCKing.com. We'll make it for you and ship it right to your door.